Welcome, and thanks for joining me today on Mortgage Manager Playbook, a podcast for sales leaders who want to improve their team's sales performance and originate more loans. I'm Pat Sherlock, your host. Hi, everyone. This is an important topic, why the local lenders should be joining the local and state MBA associations. And I have the perfect person to talk about that is Mark Deitz. Mark is Managing Director of State Employee Credit Union, but more importantly, he is President of the Mortgage Bankers of Metropolitan Washington. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is a great topic, and I've been on this topic for many times, and I'm glad you're willing to share your thoughts about it. And you've been involved with the local MBA for a long time. But let's start out with some of the big benefits that you see that the local lender gets, in particular, how that applies to loan officers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks again. I think this is a very relevant topic. Frankly, we're all looking for increased involvement, especially with what's happened in the last couple of years in our industry. And sharing information. So ultimately, each member company should look at the opportunity to align themselves with local, state, and local associations for these specific benefits. One is education, the other is advocacy. And the third, really, which probably is understood but goes unnoticed, is networking, peer networking and fellowship. So how that relates to, it used to be this kind of thought or stigma, if you will, that the state and local MBA was more geared towards the manager and above, level. And it's really been transformed because of the absence of the fear of recruiting. Having a loan officer show up to a state and local MBA event, a manager might feel threatened, by their attendance. Some other manager might see them as being a professional and have interest in, trying to recruit. That's really absent in the associations now, and is really a point of focus. So when we think about what the individual MLO gets out of it, and I'll give you a perfect example of maybe three examples of what we at the Metropolitan Washington MBA have looked at. We've geared a lot of our educational events specifically to serve those mortgage loan officers. And, a few examples are obviously we've just, coming out of the National Association of Realtors lawsuit. So panel discussion offered for MLO benefit to understand, as well as member company benefit, how will this impact our industry? What kind of business opportunities may come out of this lawsuit? In other words, are JVs going to be a result of this? Are we going to see new contracts? And how do we deal with that as MLOs? Things like that. So, ultimately education, real time and very relevant in how to navigate this sort of new future, which is real estate commissions and how we adapt to that. Another would be how artificial intelligence, we had a webinar on artificial intelligence, how that may be used and thought of to be used in the future with mortgage banking, which is a little bit beyond my realm, but it's very interesting and very, timely as well. And really the third is we had a couple of weeks ago, a very successful and very well attended by loan officer top producers panel. So we had an individual who, has been in the business a long time, has a large team. And, he talked about the success that has come from the structure of having a team and what each player on that team does on a daily basis to all the parts are greater than the sum of the whole, or whatever the expression is, but how that structure might be attractive or might be thought of for an MLO who's thought of that. Second was, really more builder facing. So how they, think about and had started to engage builders, what that looked like, what those conversations sounded like, and, how to gear business around that and build a structure and a presentation around gaining share with builders. And then the third was an independent mortgage banker, just, a traditional mortgage banker and shared best practices and successes. So regardless of which lane you may find yourself as an MLO, there's something to be learned, even if it's one little nugget of information, that you pick up from some of these educational series of events. It's there for the taking.
So, Mark, how often, I know you have your annual meetings, so how often are you conducting these educational efforts? Are they done monthly, or talk about that?
Yeah, so we've really given it back up to early last year. Of course, our industry be it real estate, had seen quite a significant change with not only rates, but inventory and, a lot of attrition changes. So really the compass for us kind of changed in direction for how to create motivation and relevant topics that might just truly help those who might be struggling in business navigate, the new norm, if you will. Call it affordability, call it whatever have you, market share decreases, et cetera. And, so we looked at having an every other month educational event and then an annual. We used to have joint annual conference just because geographically, we share some space and some membership with Maryland to the north, Virginia to the south, and that kind of thing. So we did have a joint conference that was larger, but candidly, because of the expense of hosting something like that on a large scale, we've all agreed, the individual associations, to do this year our own conference. So I know Maryland has one coming up this week, which I'm sure is going to be tremendously successful. And then we're going to have one coming up in the fall. So kind of sprinkling in some educational webinars to in-person panels and followed by networking event, along with some charitable events as well. Just looking to put all the talent together and make sure that people have an opportunity to network and get to know broader audience that they may not otherwise get to peer connect with.
So how would you encourage managers and lenders who join to make sure that all of these benefits actually do translate, because your educational events are well known and you certainly have great topics. Can you emphasize what you see that the lenders get out of it because they're now really inviting the loan officers?
Yeah, it's actually a very well stated question. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. I'll refer back to that top producers panel, if you will. Some of our member associations, as I mentioned, it was so well attended that we had asked some of those larger, membership companies who had a larger attendance from some of their MLOs, what sort of motivated them. We want to do better and offer, again, the best topics that we can. And they said, candidly, this replaced a sales meeting for us. When you think about it, it's not only that, but you can have some fun after those events as well. So I'll harken back to just sort of, a few really important sort of, higher level lanes of thinking about what you get with your membership. Of course, one is just like any member association, you'll have access to, timely information. So we do a weekly or monthly rather newsletter that highlights not only the events, educational and otherwise, but we'll talk about the NAR settlement or trigger leads that had been a really big legislative push this year, and have some links to some advocacy and otherwise articles to the National MBA, because we are an associate member of the MBA as well. So we're passing along a lot of relevant information. But the three lanes, I would say, one is, building knowledge through education and networking. So that's really our educational membership lane, or our educational session series lane. The second is community. So we do really encourage across all organizations that networking and fellowship. I've met through my time, not only on the board and on the executive team with the MBA here in Metro Washington, I was also on the board of Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers Association. So I've met some of the industry's best peers, and I'm happy to call them friends. And frankly, I met you through some of these peer friends. So
Sure.
The more involved you are, the better your opportunities for a wider scope of, networking. And the third really that I'm most passionate about is advocacy. So we happen to be, Pat, in this week of the national push for the Mortgage Action Alliance Advocacy Week. We had the advocacy conference, National Advocacy Conference, about a month ago, where we got together and understood what the most relevant issues were to translate that into appointments that we had on Capitol Hill with our individual legislators from each state, which was highly successful and a great experience. And I encourage everybody to look at it, attending that. But the Mortgage Action Alliance is a turnkey, it's free, it's a turnkey benefit, let's call it, for the industry, where when there's a need to get support behind, as an example, the credit trigger lead issue, that the MBA, if you're enrolled, would send out a request for you to support their position collectively in the industry's position on a certain relevant topic, that you literally enter your address, including a zip code, and it sends out a form email to in support of or otherwise for a very relevant legislative issue that might occur and that sends automatically to the House delegation and congressional delegation, senators. So again, it's education, it's networking, it's advocacy, it's real-time information that somebody can use. There are we have some benefits sort of when you think about a co-op, there's some member benefits along with some services that have aligned with us. So, all of that's kind of listed on our website.
So Mark, talk about, and I think the perception always has been that many times, and even on the conference side of it, it's very geared towards compliance and certainly the legal component of mortgage lending, and not as much on the sales side. And of course, our fundamental problems on the sales side. And it sounds like you've moved towards having more sales improvement type of education. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. The educational series or the focus might depend on sort of what's generally happening in the industry. Certainly when Dodd-Frank came about, we wanted to make sure that, we went through all of what, all of the impacts that TRID would have on not only the origination of a loan, but compliance aspects. So there may be times where we have to gear our educational events around that, but we're not naive to the fact that really right now, our biggest opportunities to support, and that was candidly our focus on our conferences, is gearing the guest speakers around the information that was most attractive to mortgage loan originators, and not necessarily, and we'll have breakout sessions, don't get me wrong, for compliance and underwriting and credit risk management, or secondary specifically, but ultimately just driving the top of the sales funnel is really where our focus has been over the last year, including this year.
So Mark, in your own case, and I'm sure our listeners would want to hear, I know you've been involved with these associations for a long time. How has it helped your own career?
Yeah, I think, certainly if I look back to 2015, I had been involved with the board initially, and I had met some individuals who had gone through the process to obtain their certified mortgage banking designation. That's something that interested me in this journey of becoming the progression of a professional, advancement that I desired. So going through that process was important for me. And then going through the few years that I was on initially, the board of the Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers Association got me more involved and probably more exposure to individuals that made a difference in my career, and kind of paying that forward. Now the more sort of the way it happens, the more time you spend and the more you invest yourself in, the association and show up to events, the more you'll be leaned into. So I kind of came on the ladder 4 years ago with the MBA of Metro Washington, and have gotten probably more out of it personally than I've given back. But at the end of the day, whether it's advocacy or education or networking, if you're not getting involved, then you're not going to be involved. In other words, your success is only going to be driven by how much you put into, your involvement with the associations or learning from others. So if your mentality is just kind of stay in your lane and keep doing what you're doing, if you're doing great, that's probably that'll probably work for you. But if you're open to relationships and expanding your role within the industry, that can be advocacy or being part of a panel, people, giving back to those who might have given to you. If you've got that mentality, I think that kind of aligns itself with a lot of the leadership within the associations.
Well, Mark, I think you certainly summarized all the great benefits. And certainly if people are interested in talking to you about joining and where can they get more information, could you share some of that information to them?
Sure. Specifically, if you want to take a look at, we have a nice membership and benefits brochure on our website, www.mbamw.org. That's a good place. Obviously, a lot of our peer associations, if your listeners are outside of the Metro Washington area, typically each state would have an association or at least a regional association. So take a look at that. And folks will definitely, if they're interested in reaching out to me by LinkedIn or otherwise, don't hesitate.
So any other takeaways that you would like our listeners? And obviously it's been beneficial for your own career. And of course, this is the case for all of us that have been in mortgage banking for a long time. Sure. And we want to encourage young people to actually start going up the sequence and becoming certainly more well-known in their particular area. Any other thoughts that you might have, Mark?
It starts with involvement, right? Whether you're a leader in an organization, bring somebody along with you, bring a younger mortgage professional along with you. You're going to see them progress in their career, likely, twofold or whatever against the peer that's not involved. If you're a mortgage loan officer, ask your manager to bring you along, show interest, and that'll be the opening for the door for you. But the more involved you are, I think the better off you are as a professional mortgage banker. And that's certainly what I've gotten out of it and what I've seen.
Well, I want to thank you, Mark, and I want to thank our listeners. And I can't emphasize enough. I mean, I'm part of the local MBA. And of course, I know Mark's been, and now he's president. And so it's well worthwhile, not only for the informational side, but obviously for the give back that you have that opportunity to do to our wonderful industry. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks as always, Pat.
Thanks for listening to Mortgage Manager Playbook. You can catch up on all our episodes by subscribing to receive each week a new show. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and team members. If you're looking to increase production, call me to discuss my prospecting sales training program, Ramping Up Realtor Referral Sources. Check out my website, www.patsherlock.com.